Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana
Jamuna Tira Vanachari
Tira Vanachari
Jaya Radha Sindabihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Sindabihari
Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Brajana
Jamuna Tira Vanachari
Tira Vanachari
Jaya Radha Madhava Sindabihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Sundarbihari
Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana
Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Vishnu Pad Karma Hamsa Puri Rajakacharya Astacharya Swata Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya Vishnu Pad Karma Hamsa Puri Rajakacharya Astacharya Swata His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Gita Govardhan Ki Maya Pradam Ki Damadam Ki Jamuna Devi Ki Ganga Devi Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaur Premanande. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Srinivadi Kashyatadashita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Ayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotana Devam Sarasvatim Vyasyam Chatudaya Madhyaya Nastapaya Srubhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloki Bhakti Bhavati Nushtaki. So good morning, everyone. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, the third canto, 9th chapter. We're going to read the 36th verse today. The 9th chapter is Brahma's prayers for creative energy. So, Nyato ham bhavata tvid adya,
Natoham Bhagavata Itvayatya.
Durvijneo pi dehanam,
Durvijneo Videhinam.
Yanmam tvaman yase yuktam,
Yanman Tvam Manase Yuktam.
Bhutendriya gunatmambi,
Bhutendriya Gunatmavi.
Natyoham bhavata tvidya,
Natoham Bhagavata Tvaya.
Durvijneo pi dehinam,
Durvijneo Videhinam.
Yanmam tvaman yase yuktam,
Yanman Tvam Manase Yuktam.
Bhutendriya gunatmambi,
Bhutendriya Gunatmavi.
Yatno tam bhavata tviyatva,
Yatoham Bhagavata Tvaya.
Durvijnyo pi dehinam,
Durvijnyo Videhinam.
Yam man tvam manyase yuktam,
Yanman Tvam Manase Yuktam.
Bhutendriya gunatmavi.
Bhutendriya Gunatmavi.
Yatoham bhavata adya
Yatoham Bhagavata Tvaya. Durvijnyo Videhinam. Yanman Tvam Manase Yuktam. Bhutendriya Gunatmavi.
यातो अहम भवतात्वज्ञ
Yatoham bhavata tvaya.
दुर्विज्ञ यो अपि देहिनां
Durvijnyo Videhinam.
यन्मां त्वं मन्यसे युक्तं
Yanman tvam manase yuktam,
भूतेन्द्रिय गुणात्मभिः
Bhutendriya gunatmavi.
Natvoham Bhagavata Tvaya.
Atvaham bhavata tvaya.
Durvijnyo Videhinam.
Durvijnyo pi dehinam,
Yanmam Tvam Manase Yuktam.
Yanman tvam manase yuktam,
Bhutendriya Gunatmavi.
Bhutendriya gunatmavi.
Yatoham Bhagavata Tvaya.
Durvijnyo pi dehinam, Yanman tvam manase yuktam, Bhutendriya gunatmavi. Anyone online?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Gyato aham bhavata tvadya
Nyatam bhavata tvaya.
durvigyo api dehinam
Durvijnyo pi dehinam,
yanmam tvam manyase ayuktam
Yanman tvam manyase yuktam,
bhutendriya gunatmabhihi.
Bhutendriya gunatmavi. Anyone else online?
ज्ञातोऽहं भवता त्वद्य
Yatoham Bhagavata Tvaya.
दुर्विज्ञेयोऽपि देहिनां
Durvijnyo pi dehinam,
यन्मां त्वं मनयसे युक्तं
Yanman tvam manyase yuktam,
भूतेन्द्रियगुणात्मभिः
Bhutendriya.
Gunatmavi.
हरे कृष्ण
Hare Krishna. So we'll do one. Jnata,
Yata.
known.
Known.
Aham,
Aham.
myself.
Myself.
Bhavata,
Bhavata.
by you.
You.
Two.
Two.
But.
But.
Adya,
Adya.
today.
Today.
Duha,
Duha.
difficult.
Difficult.
Vigneya,
Vigneya.
to be known.
To be known.
Api,
Api.
in spite of.
Spider.
Dehinam,
Dehi.
for the conditioned soul.
For the conditions. So.
Yat,
Yeah.
because.
Because.
Mam,
Mom.
me.
Me.
Tvam,
Tom.
you.
You.
Manyase,
Manyase.
understand.
Understand.
Ayuktam,
Ayukta.
without being made of.
Without being made of.
Bhuta,
Uta.
material elements.
Material elements.
Indriya,
Indriya.
material senses.
Material senses.
Guna,
Guna.
material modes.
Material modes.
Atmaviha,
Atmaviya.
and false ego like the conditioned soul.
And false ego like the conditioned soul.
Translation of purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki.
Sure.
Although I am not easily knowable by the conditioned soul, you've known me today because you know that my personality is not constituted of anything material, and specifically not of the 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. Purport. Knowledge of the supreme absolute truth does not necessitate negation of the material manifestation, but understanding of spiritual existence as it is. To think that because material existence is realized in forms, therefore spiritual existence must be formless, is only a negative material conception of spirit. The real spiritual conception is that spiritual form is not material form. Brahma appreciated the eternal form of the Lord in that way, and the personality of Godhead approved of Brahma's spiritual conception. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna condemned the material conception of his body, a conception that arises because he is apparently present like a man. The Lord may appear in any of his many spiritual forms, but he is not materially composed, nor has he any difference between body and soul. That is the way of conceiving the spiritual form of the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yeda Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamayam Dadatu Sadvatantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shikati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Om Vishnu Krishna Krishna So I'll read the translation again. Although I am not easily knowable by the conditioned soul, you've known me today because you know that my personality is not constituted of anything material, and specifically not of the 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. So in this purport, actually, Prabhupada references a specific verse about whether or how people may conceive of Krishna as a material person. And when Krishna came down here, he descended here, for a specific reason. But he's expansion, he's God. He came here and all the different incarnations, all the different manifestations of the Lord have come for a specific reason. But that doesn't mean just because they're here in the material energies that they are in fact material. And Prabhupada was referencing in Bhagavad Gita 9:11, Avjyanati mam mudha manusim tanum ashritam param bhavam ajnato mam bhuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. So how can this happen? How can fools deride him as human? Because they see him in a human form, yet he's not. He's not, because they don't have the vision. They don't have the ability to see the Lord in his full effulgence. And even those, now we can't be mistaken that was Arjuna a fool because he didn't immediately know who Krishna was? No. Where the gopis fools? Was Mother Yashoda a fool? No. So we have to be careful, right? We have to be careful not to confuse the two. And to think that just because Arjuna didn't immediately know that his cousin was Krishna Just because Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda didn't know that this sweet baby boy that they were caring for was Lord Krishna. We can't consider them in the category of fools. Why? What makes them different? What makes them not fools? What makes people who did say that Krishna is a human being fools? Yoga Maya. Why? Because they're in Braj. They're in Yoga Maya. Yoga Maya there's two sides of the same coin, and I love the understanding of Maya because there's Maha Maya and there's Yoga Maya. And they're really the two same sides, the two different sides of the same coin, because Maha Maya, if our desires are material, Maha Maya is more than happy to deliver us to the material pleasures. Maha is a servant of Krishna, but Yoga Maya, when our intention is to love the Lord, to love Krishna, and have a relationship with Krishna, then Yoga Maya will deliver us. But in the pastime of Krishna, when he was a baby boy, Yoga Maya came in because they were all devoted, absolutely devoted to the absolute. They are devoted to the Supreme Lord. So in that instance, when Krishna came as a baby, Yoga Maya covered them over so that they could experience these different rasas, right? The Vatsalya rasa is so sweet. That parental, that paternal, the maternal. So that Vatsalya rasa, Madhurya Lila, that sweet, loving, conjugal love, the friendship. So all of these rasas, these pastimes are there because Yoga Maya is allowing for that, because they have already a deep, deep love and a deep devotion to the Lord. So when he comes down here, he's enabling them to carry out those rasas for them. But here, so let's get back to fools, right? So we have to be careful that fools who deride Krishna as being human in that human form are those who cannot understand the conception of God. They can't truly understand the conception of God because they're blinded. That's different from being covered over by Yoga Maya and that pure, that balm of love. Because they're blinded by ignorance. They're blinded, the nescience, the darkness that covers them over and keeps them from actually seeing God. And when we look at these material energies, and this is today's purport is very much just talking about these material energies, right? Because Krishna is not part of these material energies, but we're part of them. We're immersed in them, but we are not material. We have our spiritual, we have Atma, we have Paramatma. So this keeps us from being completely material, but yet we forget that. We forget that completely. So so I want to get a little technical for a minute. We're going to talk about some things that came up in today's verse, which is the senses or the elements. So you have these five gross and the three subtle. Okay. So in Bhagavad Gita 7:4, Krishna lists these, he enumerates them: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So now which is which? We have earth, air, water, fire, ether. Those are the gross elements. And the subtle ones, they're subtle: intelligence, false ego, and mind. Okay. So we have all of these things these elements that seem to govern, but there's more. There's not just those. There's actually more that comes along with that. So there's actually all of those things. So we have the intelligence, false ego, earth, air, water. But we also have these senses. We have the ability to sense through the eyes, the nose, ears, mouth. So we have smell, we have taste, we have our vision, we have a sense of touch. Okay, so there's all of these. So there's 24 technically. There's 24, the senses and the gross elements is 24 in this material world. So we have a lot that's kind of engaging us. And on every moment to moment of our lives, we have everything. We have our senses, we have the elements, we have the subtle elements, the mind, the false ego, the intelligence, all of these things are constantly around us endlessly. That's kind of hard to conceive of, that all of these things are constantly, and then we have the modes of material nature, right? So we know the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance. So all of this stuff is here. It's constantly tugging at us. And they say the modes of material nature are fighting. They're fighting for control over us. The mode of ignorance is trying to overcome mode of passion to bring us to the mode of ignorance. But the mode of goodness is like, oh, trying to overcome the mode of passion and overcome the mode of ignorance. Mode of passion, same thing. So we have all of these things playing out in our lives, which can really convolute things, I guess you could say. So here we have this discussion of matter. It's really a discussion of matter versus spirit. It's what it comes down to. Matter, the material energies, and spirit. So what is matter? Matter is created by spirit. Matter has been created. All of these material energies, this table, my body, all of this has been created by the Lord. So there is the creation part, but we're material. So we have all these things in matter, but we're dependent on the spiritual energies, because we are the part of the internal energies of the Lord. We're the marginal potency, essentially, because we are the internal and the external. We're kind of sitting in between, but we are, because we have Atma and Paramatma. We also have we're spiritual. So it's really, when we think about matter versus spirit, there are long articles written about it and discussions about this topic specifically. And today's verse really kind of brings us into this, because here we know that Lord Brahma is saying, I know that you are not part of, you are spiritual, right? So Lord, these are prayers. And Krishna is saying, although I'm not easily knowable by the conditioned soul, you know me today because you know my personality is not constituted of anything material, and specifically not of the 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. So Krishna, just like he does in Bhagavad Gita, he's very clear about how he is, that he is not material. He should not be confused as being part of these material energies. And so here in Bhagavad Gita, I'm going to go back to the discussion of the elements again. So I'm going to read a little bit of what Prabhupada talks about with these, because I think better to hear it from him. So this is 7.4 from the Gita. It says, the science of God analyzes the constitutional position of God and his diverse energies. Material nature is called Prakriti, or the energy of the Lord in his different Purusha incarnations. So these are the expansions, as described in the Narada Pancharatna. So I'm going to read just the translation of what he gives from that Narada Pancharatna. For material creation, Lord Krishna's plenary expansion assumes 3 Vishnus. The first one, Mahavishnu, creates the total material energy known as Mahat Tattva. The second, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, enters into all universes to create diversities in each of them. The third, Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, is diffused in all-pervading supersoul in all the universes and is known as Paramatma. He is present even within the atoms. Anyone who knows these 3 Vishnus can be liberated from material entanglement. And he goes on to say this material world is a temporary manifestation of one of the energies of the Lord. All the activities of the material world are directed by these 3 Vishnu expansions of Lord Krishna. So seems to me it's pretty clear, right? It's all Krishna. It's all the Lord's energies. It's all the Lord's expansions here. But what happens? So how do we get entangled like this? How do we become maybe a fool if we're someone out on the street? How do we become a fool that doesn't see that the Lord is here when he's here? That doesn't see that the Lord is not human when we read about him in scripture? How does that happen? Because we all descend from him. It's like suddenly waking up one morning and just thinking that we just arrived here and we don't have parents. Some teenagers might act like that. I'm sure parents of teenagers might experience that sometimes. Maybe we were that bratty teenager that was just like, I don't have parents, I'm independent, I can do it on my own. But how does that happen that we somehow become, as human beings, become like a bratty teenager, right? We don't want to, Chris, God who? I'm here to experience, I am here to have pleasure, I am here to be independent. So somewhere programmed into us, there is a natural desire to want to be free and independent. And like I said, those of you who have had children or, remember when you were a kid, you probably remember feeling that at some point. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to have your own thoughts and your own ways of being and your own way of expressing yourself. You wanted to go out into the world and forge your path. Where does that come from? So let's just kind of keep swimming upstream for a minute. Like, where did that come from? Well, where did that come from? Where did that come from? So we can keep asking, where did this desire for independence come from? Well, Krishna gave it to us, but we had to want it somewhere. But this is something that's the nature of the soul. Krishna doesn't want to strong arm us into a relationship. He wants us to come to him on our own will. He wants us to be with him because we want to be with him. So he gives us the opportunity for free will. And this is what free will gets us. Gets us a little bit entangled, unfortunately, but that's part of it. That's part of that free will. But Krishna's very clever because he never just lets us go out there hanging, right? He puts things into place like, oh, those modes of material nature. Wow, okay. He gets little nets that kind of ensnare us. He's got Mahamaya out there just doing some work for him. If you want to keep going swimming out further and further away from the shore, he's like, okay, here's some nice little, thing you can chase. That's fine. You can do it. But what happens is that the further we swim from shore, the less certain things become. The waters become very rocky. All of these elements, these gross elements, and then we have the kleshas. Oh my God, we've got Adi Atmika, Adi Bodhika, Adi Devika. They're just kind of like bearing down on us. We have these suffering, these modes of suffering from other people or other entities and the demigods and from our own minds, right? So here, it's quite a predicament that we've gotten ourselves into here as human beings, as a living entity. And so I was thinking about this yesterday. My husband and I were on vacation this past week. We were down in the Shenandoah Valley, which is very beautiful. We did lots and lots of hiking, and it was great. On our drive home yesterday, we were chatting, and I was just really thinking about how spiritual life, we can see people that are they want to be good people. They want to do the right thing, but they don't have necessarily an orientation back to God, right? They just may be agnostic in their view. They might say, okay, maybe we're not alone. There's some other energy out there. At the end of the day, they're trying to be good people. They're building some, hopefully some good karma, we'll say, right? They're doing the right thing, but they're not really aligned with any relationship. But then once you know that there is a relationship to be had, you can't unknow it, right? So now suddenly something inside might switch on a light to say, I feel like I'm just feeling this. Something inside of me is telling me that there's more than just what's around here. And now I want to further know what that is. I want to explore that a little bit. I want to get to know what this relationship actually looks like. What is this relationship that is to be had with the Lord? And so then we start taking steps in that direction. But it's not easy. As Drona mentioned yesterday in class, it's not easy because, you can have one person that is, doing an activity that is in that material space, and someone that's doing that activity that is spiritual, then and the outcome might be the same. It might seem the same, but spiritually, one is filling our spiritual piggy bank, the other is not. So one's just putting money in this, in the material bank, and the other one's putting money into the spiritual bank. But how do we get to that point of doing all of our activities in a spiritual plane platform? It takes time. And so I was like, really, I was driving home, driving up 81 and, just thinking about these things, because it can be very bewildering for the living entity, because as it said here in this verse today, like there are all of these energies here that are entangling us continually, pulling us in. And we're still in this living form, this body. We still have to maintain it. We still have to feed it. We still have to put food on our, put a roof over our heads and do all the things to maintain this body. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen on its own. And so this is the natural progression of life. And so, and I mention this sometimes in other classes, but, we are here in the middle planet, right? So we have the heavenly planets, the hellish planets, and we're here kind of smack in the middle. So we have the aspects of both influencing, not to mention we're in Kali Yuga. So I'm not trying to paint like some grim picture here. I'm just painting the realistic picture of where we're at, that this is the nature of this material position, we'll call it. This is where we landed, because we wanted to swim a little further outshore. We saw some sparkly treasure in the ocean. We just thought we'd chase. And next thing we turn around with, whoa, how did I get here? And now we're trying to swim back. We're trying to swim back. We're trying to swim back. And we can't see the shore anymore. So what happens? We can't see that shore anymore. We know we've gotten too far out. We know we need to get back. What do we do? How do we find our way back? So how do we get back to shore? Well, the first thing we can do is pray, right? So the first thing we have access to is we have Paramatma, we have Super Soul. So if nothing else, we can start with prayer, and we can say, wow, I've gotten really far away from you, dear Lord. I don't know how to get myself back to shore. I don't know how to get myself back to you so that I can even think about a relationship. So in that prayer, we can just beg. And this is the mantra, the Maha Mantra is begging. We're saying Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. What are we saying? Dear Lord, bring me back. Engage me in your service. Don't let go. But we have to not let go. And that's the key. So we might be praying, we're out to shore, and we're out in the middle of the ocean, praying. Please, oh my God, I'm so lost. I need to get back to shore. And then all of a sudden something catches our eye. Like, hold that thought. I'll be back. And then we suddenly think we're, swimming in a good direction. Next thing we're like, oh, I'm even further away. And now a storm has hit. So this is really, like I said, this is the predicament of our material lives here. But rest assured, Krishna is with us all the time. And Krishna always has our back, as long as Krishna is very happy to engage us in whatever direction we want to go. And so if we start to acknowledge that relationship, when we start to really go deep into curiosity, deep into a desire, then lo and behold, we might actually engage Mahamaya. Mahamaya might actually try and start helping us and paving a course forward for us. And then Yogamaya. So Mahamaya, if we engage Mahamaya, she'll actually turn us over to Yogamaya, and she'll be like, okay, here we go. Now Yogamaya is going to help pave a path forward. And that's really, if you, in the Brahma Samhita, one of the verses gives a beautiful description of Maya, and how Maya really, as long as we are engaging in material energy, she will engage us until that moment until that moment that we decide that we are going to choose something else. We're going to choose the Lord. And then Yogamaya will now take over, and Yogamaya will pave that path forward. So today's verse, in knowing that Lord Brahma, these prayers, and Krishna's responding to say that, and Prabhupada's purport says, the knowledge of supreme absolute truth does not necessitate negation of material manifestation, but understanding of spiritual existence as it is. So for those who think that Krishna is material, they're completely missing the point that Krishna has created these material energies, but he is not of them. So it's not a negation. It's not an either or scenario. And that's the thing with Krishna, because he is the all-pervading. He is the supreme Lord, the supreme force. You can't have this either or, because we can't limit Krishna. As soon as we try to limit our thinking with Krishna, limit what Krishna can do, we're now turning him into a material conception. And I mentioned, I may have referenced this a while ago, but I got into a debate, it was a few months ago with someone, and we kept debating back and forth on different concepts about, Krishna and Bhagavatam and creation. And, I was like, wait a minute, the more we try and debate this, the more we're just condensing Krishna down. And this is something that's really important to remember, because it's, I like to get in a lively debate here and there, especially when it's on the scholarly side. I'll take the bait until I realize, I'm like, whoa, wait, this isn't going down the right path. But when we get into debate, we may think it's kata, right? There's a difference between kata and debate. And debate can maybe help us understand things better, but we have to be very careful that debate doesn't try and minimize and condense the potency of what we're reading and learning through scripture. Because as soon as we try and intellectualize it, try and condense it, distill it somehow, we're losing the essence. And we are very fortunate that these things have been put into writing for us. But we are not probably going to understand all of it, because it is supreme. And that means sometimes we just have to take things as they are and just accept them, as opposed to try and, wrangle with them and try and somehow finagle it and understand it somehow and twist ourselves in a pretzel so that we can put it in the scope of what's relatable in the material world. That can be really tricky. It's a slippery slope, right? If we're trying to take Shastra, we can apply it, but if we overly twist it so that it then becomes a material lesson, there's a fine line to walk there. Very tricky, right? It's like I said, it's a slippery slope, so we have to be careful. So when we talk about Krishna as material or spiritual, and this is Prabhupada's, not Prabhupada, but in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, fools deride me. This can also be very foolhardy. And this is where the speculators, Prabhupada very much chastised those who were, mental speculators, he called them. What were the mental speculators doing when they were discussing Shastra? They were trying to intellectualize it in a way that they could understand and make it seem to fit their conception, of the Lord, to fit their conception of spiritual life, of material life. And we can't do that with Krishna. Because as I said, as soon as we try and do this mental gymnastics to fit it into our box of what we believe, we have now tried to materialize something very spiritual. And it will fail. The outcome will not be good. I'm sure of it. It will not be good if we continually try and do that. So to understand Krishna as spiritual is to just do that. To know that Krishna was here in a body, and to know that he was not a man, We just understand that because he's God. And if we try and place anything else on him, we are diminishing him. And how can we diminish God? Because God is beyond all conception. And so going back to Prabhupada's purport here, it says, to think that because material existence is realized in forms, therefore spiritual existence must be formless, is only a negative material conception of spirit. The real spiritual conception is that spiritual form is not material form. So the real spiritual conception is that spiritual form is not material form, even if it looks like it. Even so, our eyes, you've heard that your eyes deceive you. You know, someone can say your eyes deceive you. Why is that? How do our eyes deceive us? Well, what are some of the material, the 24 material elements and senses? Sight. It's material. What do we know about material energies? They are the flaws of the human. We know that they are flawed. They are not perfect. Our vision is not perfect. Our senses are not perfect. They can convolute things a little bit. They come from the spiritual energies. Krishna has manifested everything. But because of our own coverings, because of our own I don't like the word contamination. It just makes it sound so bleak. But because of our own exposure, let's call it, we're exposed. You know, we have exposure to material energies constantly. And we have exposure to our own karma. We have exposure to our own mental, like our intelligence. And this is why this intelligence, mind, false ego, the three subtle elements, those are really important to not forget. Because they play such a vital role in how we perceive and how we engage in our spiritual lives. And the mind is very tricky. And so we have to really be aware of what the mind is doing. What is intelligence? Now, intelligence, if it's directed in the right path, can be very beneficial. The mind, when it's directed toward Krishna, can be very powerful. The false ego, when we identify the false ego, we can see it. We can then overcome it, right? You know, so, but they're still always going to be there. They are constants. They are not going to go away. Can we exist in this material world without air? We know that's a fact. Earth, we have to sit on something, right? Water, we need that for existence. Fire is pretty important as well. And if you even just in our bodies, Agni in the digestion, right? So we need these elements. They're essential, but we need to understand them too. I need to understand that these elements are all playing out. So if we now look at our lives and we say, okay, how can I take myself and go closer and closer and closer to Krishna? How can I, like what Drona was talking about yesterday, how can we go from just doing a material activity for the sake of a material outcome to doing that same activity for the sake of growth, Krishna? So bhakti, there's something called mixed. We have our mixed devotion. So you have pure devotion, right? Like Maharaj Ambarish, he gives that example of a pure devotee, of that perfect devotee. But most of us are in this mixed, I speak for myself especially, I am very mixed. I'm more on the side, I try, but that mixed means that we have desires, we have proclivity toward the spiritual energies, but we're still over here too, experiencing material world. So how do we get ourselves closer to being in that pure space? First and foremost, we pray, we chant, we bring ourselves closer to a guru, spiritual master, read Prabhupada's books, And the other thing that I think is really critical And this is something that I don't know how much we talk about it, but it's really that compassionate self-evaluation, I'm going to call it. Compassionate self-evaluation, because we don't need to just be tearing ourselves down constantly and just, it's, yes, we want to be humble. We don't want to elevate ourselves. We want to be compassionate. Like, okay, wow, this is where I'm at, but honest. I'm here. I'm probably more on the material, inclination. And I want to get over here. I want to think more about Krishna. I want to think less about this or that, So I'm going to just continue to pray, continue to chant, and continue to be aware, continue every day to be aware of how I am engaging with the world. Am I engaging with the people in my life in a way that is going to be pleasing to Krishna? And right now, we can just try and please Krishna through our actions. Would Krishna be happy with me with how I'm treating this person? Would Krishna be happy with me with what I'm doing with my money right now? Would Krishna be happy with me if I am doing this? So even like if we're not, the most elevated, like Radharani said yesterday, giving classes, we're doing this, we're doing that. Not that I'm sitting here giving class, but that doesn't make me anything. I'm just sitting here sharing with you what I've read. But does that, we can be a poor sweeper on the sweets rather than a show bottle spiritualist. It's Prabhupada. That's what he says. So rather to be a poor sweeper on the street than a show bottle spiritualist, because that sincerity and that humility is more sincere than someone who puts a show on of spiritual life. So we want to constantly just be thinking about how we're going to engage in our lives with Krishna. How are we going to make Krishna happy today, in this moment, in our minds, in our hearts? And so this is the process. Prabhupada lays it out beautifully for us. He has given us a perfect process. It's how we choose to take it. So I'll end here. It's 8:45. So I will end here, see if there's any questions, feedback, reflections, comments, corrections, of course, online or in person.
Thank you. A couple points you brought up that were really helpful for me. This idea that God is inconceivable is the challenge to our false ego. We don't want to believe that there's something out there that we can't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to understand it and fit it into our body. We don't want to accept the fact that, and Krishna says that I'm inconceivable, right? And then he says, well, you can understand me through devotion, and he gives parts of them, but even with that, it's his mercy allowing us to try to be able to understand him. But he can pull that away and remain inconceivable once again. And it's just something that we struggle with. Even as devotees, what to speak of like in impersonalists, but even devotees, sometimes there's these topics that we can't quite understand. And then we come up with our own theories and our own, but the real reason is based on our limited brains and knowledge, which in comparison to the universal creation and what's beyond this creation is so small. Like we can understand what's going on in this room, maybe in our little sphere, but to think that, we're going to understand God. It's something that we just don't want to accept.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a reason I have to understand it.
Yeah, it's an uncertainty and lack of understanding is very hard for the human mind to accept. It creates anxiety. It's one of the greatest sources of anxiety is not understanding. So how do we navigate that? How do we, get out of this anxiety of not truly understanding and knowing and just being surrendered to that. That's part of the Shraddha. That's that faith that comes in at some point. You know, we can pray to have more faith that even if when we don't understand the inconceivable nature of the Lord, that we can just serve and pray. Yeah.
And say, I think a lot of people too don't want to understand or seek God because they're afraid to find themselves or to see themselves. And that's very scary for a lot of people. So I'm always like, just go to therapy, start there. And, you know, there's a lot of wounds that need healing in this life and in the body from, you know, upbringing or whatever, our past. And I think that also clouds our ourselves from reaching towards God.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you didn't hear what Arya was saying online, that there's a lot of people have so many wounds and things that can cloud their ability even. And yeah, that deep self-healing is so critical. The spiritual path can provide that, but if someone's not even ready to step on a spiritual path, absolutely, like therapy. I'm a big fan of referring for therapy. In my practice, I refer out for therapy often for my patients. And it's really critical that we can see that because we have to do the inward journey. Bhakti is not an there's externalities of bhakti, but the majority of bhakti practice is an internal exploration. It's an internal process. And through that internal process, that self-exploration, healing of wounds, deep wounds, is really going to get us further and further because those wounds can create huge hurdles for us, huge blocks that can prevent us from moving forward in our devotional lives. So that's an excellent point. Thank you. Yeah. Anything? Yeah.
Krishna, thank you so much for class. You made several points that really stuck with me, but I was reflecting on at least when I was in high school, it was a big trend to wear the bracelets. What would Jesus do? WWJD. And I long sort of contemplated like what would be the Krishna conscious version of that would help me just like have a practical, easy reminder. And I've stumbled on a few things, but I think you may have hit it. What would make Krishna happy? It's such a nice way to think of every moment that we have a choice. It's just like a really practical way to start shifting that consciousness. So I appreciate that. I look forward to practicing that. And I really enjoyed, I'm not sure I thought of it this way or heard it presented this way, but sort of that two sides of the same coin of Yogamaya and Mahamaya and Krishna in relation with his gopis and his parents versus our relationship with Krishna. And just reflecting on how it really illustrates Krishna's compassion and mercy, that he'll give us what we want. And also it brings some sense of accountability of like, where am I and what is it that I wanted that brought me here? And kind of owning that when we desire sense gratification, then Krishna will say, okay, no problem, here's the body. And if we already have love of Krishna and we just want to love him more, then Krishna will say, okay, well, you might not recognize me, but it's out of that playful love. I mean, that's just a beautiful reflection on the difference. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely with, you know, the daily, and I always say, you know, make sure your compass is pointed to K, you know, it's, you know, if you gotta carry your compass around all the time to know where you're going and make sure you're always trying to go toward K, you know, and you'll get there. You'll get there. It doesn't mean you're not going to pass over mountains and valleys and, you know, get stuck in a forest or, you know, whatever. But as long as you keep that point going in that direction, eventually we'll get there. And with Krishna's mercy, it's not called causeless mercy for nothing because it can happen at any moment. Krishna can just show us mercy just because he just sees something. He wants to give us a little extra love that day, show a little extra mercy toward us that helps us in our path forward to devotion and love for him. So, are there any questions online?
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
I just had a reflection, again, just confirming that all is in service of Lord Krishna, and we either knowingly or unknowingly in service of Krishna. And then after we become knowingly, we are either willingly or unwillingly in service of Krishna. Hare Krishna.
I love that. Yeah, that's that's great. So yeah, I mean, once we are in service to Krishna, it is a matter of, and it's a mood. So that's a great way to put it. Thank you, Prabhu. Who was that was speaking? Is that
Dr. David from Reading?
Dr. David from Reading? Thank you, Prabhu. That was a great insight. I love that. Anyone else? Okay. Great. Well, thank you all for coming to the class today. Thank you for coming in person. I love Saturday mornings. They're so touching. So please, those of you who are online, come on Saturdays. It's really great. We enjoy it. So we'll end here. Yeah. Panchakalpa, True Shot.